I want to tell you about the morning I understood that the house was trying to tell me something. It was not dramatic. There was no fall, no emergency, no moment of crisis that announced itself clearly. It was a Tuesday in early March, grey and cold outside, and I was trying to get the cast iron skillet down from the hook above the stove where I had hung it for 30 years. I reached for it the way I had reached for it 10,000 times, and my shoulder stopped me. Not with pain exactly, with a refusal. A quiet, final, structural refusal that said this particular movement, in this particular way, is no longer something we are doing. I stood in my kitchen with my arms still raised and looked at the skillet and understood, in the way you understand things when you have run out of room to misunderstand them, that the list of things the house required of me and the list of things I was still capable of giving it had been diverging for some time, and that the divergence had reached a point that needed honest attention rather than continued management. My name is Anita. I am 84 years old. I was a secondary school art teacher for 36 years, which meant I spent most of my adult working life in rooms full of young people who were trying to make things and who needed someone to help them see what they were actually making rather than what they were afraid they were making. I retired at 66. My husband Leonard passed 8 years ago from a series of small strokes that accumulated into the final one, and I have lived alone in a house since then, in the city where we raised our two daughters and where I have been part of the fabric of a neighborhood for longer than most of the current residents have been alive. I was managing. I want to say that because it is true and because I think the word managing covers more ground than people give it credit for. Managing is not failing. Managing is the active, daily, intelligent work of keeping a life functioning under conditions that require more of you than they once did. I was doing that work and I was doing it well enough. But the skillet told me that the work was becoming unsustainable in ways I had been choosing not to calculate fully. My daughter Patricia, who is 58 and who has two children of her own and a marriage and a demanding job and more on her schedule than any week can comfortably hold, had been circling the subject for about a year. She did not push. Patricia is not a pusher. She mentioned things. She asked questions with a particular quality of attention that told me she was monitoring the answers. She sent me articles about independent living communities with the careful neutrality of someone who has not yet decided to have the direct conversation but wants to open the door. I appreciated her care. I also appreciated that she was not yet saying the thing directly, because the thing said directly would have required me to respond directly, and I was not yet sure what my direct response was. The honest answer, in the weeks after the skillet morning, was that I did not know what I wanted. I knew what I did not want. I did not want to go to one of the places the articles described. I had visited enough of those places over the years, first with my own mother and then with friends as they arrived at those decisions, to understand what the trade was. Safety and structure and meals and the availability of care in exchange for the rhythms and the disorder and the specific texture of a life that was yours rather than managed. It was not a bad trade for the people who needed it. For me, at the point I was actually at, it felt like a trade I was not yet required to make. But I also did not know, concretely, what the alternative looked like. I am an art teacher by formation. What art teachers do, in the classroom and in the studio and in the thinking that underlies both, is look at what is actually there before deciding what it needs. Not what you expected to find, not what the plan called for. What is actually there, in this light, on this surface, with these materials. You work from the truth of the thing rather than from the idea of the thing. I decided to apply that approach to my own situation. Before I made any decision, I was going to look honestly at what was actually there. What was there, on the lost side, was real and worth naming without softening. The shoulder that would no longer lift the skillet. The fatigue that came earlier in the day than it used to and that lasted longer. The driving that had become something I thought about carefully rather than simply did, which meant I was no longer driving at night and was increasingly reluctant to drive in conditions that required fast decision making. The yard, which Leonard had tended with a dedication I had never fully matched and which had been gradually returning to its own preferences since he left. The upper level of the house, two bedrooms and a bathroom, which I had mostly stopped using and which sat above me like rooms in a different chapter. That was the lost side. I looked at it clearly. What was there on the other side required different looking. Not the inventory of capability, though that mattered too. Something else, the question I had been an art teacher long enough to know how to ask, which was, what is this actually, underneath what it appears to be? What I found, underneath the question of whether I could manage the house, was a different question entirely. The question was not whether I could live alone. The question was whether I was living at all. I had been managing for 8 years, managing the house, managing the schedule, managing the finances, managing the grief, managing the appearance of sufficiency. I had been doing all of that competently and consistently and without allowing it to be visible as effort because I had always been private about difficulty and because my daughters worried and I did not want to feed the worry. And in all of that managing, I had gradually, without noticing, stopped making things. I had not painted in 4 years, not 4 weeks, 4 years. I had not drawn anything with real intention since before Leonard died. I had taken photographs occasionally with my phone, the way everyone takes photographs now, but I had not looked at them the way I used to look at images, with the eye that asks what this is actually doing and why. I had gone through 8 years of my life without making a single thing that required the full presence of the part of me that had given 36 years of itself to teaching other people to make things. That was the thing the house had actually been trying to tell me. Not that it was too much, that I had stopped being in it the way I was supposed to be in it. This realization did not immediately produce a plan. Realizations rarely produce plans directly, but it produced a direction which is different from a plan and in some ways more useful because a direction can navigate around obstacles where a plan gets stuck on them. The direction was stop organizing your life around what you cannot do and start organizing it around what you are here to do. There is a woman named Rose who lives 4 houses down from me. She is 67 years old and she came to this neighborhood about 3 years ago after her own divorce and who has been in the way of someone who has recently arrived in a place and does not yet know very many people in it, slightly adrift from the kind of daily human contact that makes a neighborhood feel inhabited rather than merely located. I had spoken to her perhaps a dozen times. I knew she worked part time from home doing something with graphic design, which meant she had both a visual sensibility and a schedule with more flexibility in it than most people's. I knocked on her door on a Saturday morning in April. I said I was thinking about starting to paint again after a long time away from it and that I wanted someone to work alongside, not to teach and not to be taught, just to be in the same space making things in parallel, and I wondered if she might be interested. She looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone trying to determine whether what they have been offered is what it appears to be. Then she said yes. We started the following Saturday in my dining room, which has the best north light in the house and which I had been using as a general repository for things that had no other place. We cleared it. We set up a table. Rose brought her own materials, and I found mine in the storage room where they had been waiting, with more patience than I had given them credit for 4 years. I want to tell you what the first Saturday felt like because I think it matters. It felt like returning to a room you had been pretending you did not miss. Like the particular sensation of resuming something that had been waiting rather than gone. The work was clumsy at first, the hand remembering more slowly than the eye, the relationship between intention and outcome requiring renegotiation after years of disuse. But the clumsiness was interesting rather than discouraging, which is how I have always known that I am in the right place. When difficulty is interesting rather than defeating, you are where you belong. Rose was working on her own things. We did not talk much for the first hour. We did not need to. There was a quality to the shared silence of two people making things in the same room that I had forgotten the specific weight of, the way it holds you without requiring anything, the way another person's concentration alongside your own creates a kind of permission for your own concentration to go deeper. After 2 hours, we stopped and made tea and talked for a long time about what we had each been working on and why. Rose had opinions about visual problems that were genuinely interesting. I had things to say about her work that were not flattery, which she recognized and received with the particular gratitude of someone who has been working in isolation and who had missed having their choices questioned seriously. We have met every Saturday since. Sometimes we work for 2 hours and sometimes for four. Sometimes Patricia's granddaughter, who is 12 and who has recently decided she wants to learn to draw, comes and sits at the end of the table and works on her own things and asks questions that remind me why I spent 36 years answering them. Rose has brought two friends on occasional Saturdays, women her age who make different kinds of things, one who weaves and one who does ceramics when she has access to a kiln. The dining room has become, without any design on my part, a place where making happens. The skillet, for what it is worth, I replaced with a smaller pan that I can manage easily. Some adjustments are simply adjustments. They do not require a philosophy. But the Saturday mornings required something larger than an adjustment. They required remembering who I was before the managing had used up all the available space. On the practical side, because I know the practical matters and I do not want to pretend otherwise, Patricia comes on Wednesdays and we do the things together that I find difficult alone. The grocery run that requires more carrying than I can manage. The home maintenance questions that need her younger eyes and her patience with the phone calls. She comes not as a caregiver but as my daughter, which is what she is, and the Wednesday visits have become something I look forward to rather than something I tolerate as evidence of my own need. A woman from my neighborhood named Constance, who is 71 and who retired from nursing 6 years ago, has become the person I call when something about my body needs interpreting. Not my doctor, for the daily questions. Constance, she knows the difference between what requires attention and what requires only patience, and she tells me clearly which is which without making a production of it. In exchange, I have looked at her daughter's portfolio 3 times over the years and told her honestly what I saw there, which is the kind of attention that is difficult to find outside of someone who has spent a professional lifetime giving it. My younger daughter Ellen, who lives farther away and who expresses her love through logistics rather than through presence, has taken over the administration of my finances, not because I cannot manage them, but because she wanted to contribute in a way that her schedule allowed and because I was willing to receive that particular form of contribution without it feeling like surrender. That distinction matters. Receiving help in the things that do not define you, so that you can protect the time and energy for the things that do, is not weakness. It is strategic clarity about what your life is actually for. I am 84 years old. I live in the house where Leonard and I raised our daughters and where I have been for more years than I can easily count. My shoulder will not lift the cast iron skillet. My driving has its limits. The upper floor is mostly closed. The yard has been released to its own intentions. And on Saturday mornings, the dining room fills with light and with the quiet industry of women making things, and my granddaughter asks questions that I have been answering variations of for 50 years, and Rose shows me what she has been working on and asks what I honestly think, and I tell her. Patricia visited last month on a Sunday rather than her usual Wednesday and found me at the dining room table finishing something I had started the day before. She stood in the doorway for a moment before she said anything. Then she said, "Mom, that's really good." I said, "I know. I'm remembering." She came in and sat down and looked at it for a long time. Then she said something I have thought about every day since. She said, "I didn't realize you had stopped." I said, "Neither did I, until I started again." I want to leave you with what I have come to believe is the real question. Not can you manage the house, not will you be safe alone, not what arrangement makes the most practical sense. The real question is, what are you here to do, and are you doing it? If the answer is yes, then the practical questions are solvable. Find the help with the things that are not what you are here for, so that the things you are here for remain available to you. Accept the Wednesday logistics and the phone calls and the smaller pan and whatever other adjustments the body requires. Receive the help that is offered in the spirit it is offered. Let your daughters worry a reasonable amount because that is what daughters do and it comes from love. And then go to the dining room on Saturday morning and do the thing you are here to do. That is all. That is enough. That is, at 84, everything. I want to say something more about the Saturday mornings because I think they are the center of what I am describing and I have not said enough about what makes them work. The reason the Saturdays work is not that making art is a solution to the practical problems of aging. It is not. The shoulder still refuses the skillet. The driving still has its limits. The upper floor is still closed. None of that is addressed by Rose sitting across from me with her pastels while I work through a problem in watercolor that I have been thinking about since Thursday. The reason the Saturdays work is that they give the week a center that belongs to me, not to the management of limitations, not to the Wednesday logistics or the phone calls or the appointments or the accumulating administrative weight of being an elderly woman who lives alone. Those things are real and they take their time and they deserve their time. But they are not what the week is for. The week is for the Saturday morning. Everything else orbits around it. The Wednesday with Patricia is easier because I am not asking it to carry more than it can carry. The phone call with Ellen has a lightness to it because I am not bringing the full weight of my solitude to a 45-minute logistics conversation. The evenings alone, which used to have a particular quality of weight to them, have become the time I think about what I am making and what it needs and where it is going, which turns out to be a use of solitude that has its own richness. This is what I could not have told you before the skillet morning, before the Saturday with Rose, before I found my way back to the thing the house had been waiting for me to return to. That the answer to the question of whether you can manage alone is not found in the practical arrangements, though the practical arrangements matter. It is found in whether you are still living towards something, whether the days still have a direction that belongs to you rather than a direction that is organized around what you can no longer do. When I was managing without making anything, the days had no direction except forward, and forward felt too much like downward. Now the days have a direction that I choose. It happens to be toward Saturday and toward the dining room and toward the problem in the watercolor that I have not yet solved. Your direction will be something else. It will be whatever it was that you stopped doing when the managing took over. Whatever it was that you set down because you were tired, or because the grief was too large, or because the years accumulated in a way that made the things you used to do feel like things that belong to a different version of you. They do not belong to a different version. They belong to you. You set them down. You can pick them up. Not in the same way, not with the same body or the same energy or the same hours that were available at 50, but in the way that is available now, adapted to what now requires, offered on the terms that now make sense. I teach differently now than I taught at 40. Slower, from a chair, usually when the session is long, with more questions and fewer demonstrations, which it turns out is a better way to teach than the way I taught when I had the energy to demonstrate everything. The limitation produced a method that is more effective than the method it replaced. I did not plan that. I discovered it. Your limitation will produce something too, if you let it, not a consolation for what it takes. Something that is its own thing, with its own value, that would not exist without the particular constraint that created it. Patricia's granddaughter draws better than any student I had in my first 5 years of teaching. Not because she is more gifted, because she asks better questions. She asks better questions because I am slower now and have more patience with the question before I reach for the answer. This slowness is a gift I could not have given her when I was 38 and had 35 students and 4 classes a day and more energy than patience. At 84, I have more patience than energy. It turns out that for certain kinds of teaching, patience is the more important of the two. That is the thing I want to leave you with, finally and completely. The arrangement that keeps you in your life, in your house, in the fullness of who you are rather than in the managed version of who you are becoming, is not an arrangement you find ready made. It is one you build slowly and specifically from the actual materials of your actual situation. Your skills and your limits and your neighbors and your daughters and your dining room and your Saturday mornings and whatever it is that, when you stop managing long enough to hear it, is still asking you to come back to it. It is there. It has been waiting. You have been too busy surviving to notice it waiting. Notice it now. Go back to it. Build the Saturday around it, whatever your Saturday is. The house is not trying to tell you that you cannot stay. It is trying to tell you that you have been away from yourself for too long. Come home.